The Great Chamber of the Galactic Council was the largest room ever built by intelligent beings. It floated in the empty space between three dying stars, a monument to the power of the 17 species who ruled the galaxy. Crystal walls stretched for miles in every direction. Light from the dying stars painted everything in shades of red and gold. 10,000 delegates from across known space had gathered to witness something that had not happened in 3,000 years. A species was about to be erased from galactic civilization. Ambassador stood alone in the center of the chamber. She was a small woman with gray hair and tired eyes. Around her, the delegates of the Galactic Council rose in circular tiers like a living mountain. Some had scales, some had feathers, some had no bodies at all, existing only as patterns of light and thought. All of them looked down at her with expressions that ranged from pity to disgust to cold satisfaction. High Arbiter rose from his throne of living crystal. He was ancient even by the standards of his species, and his bioluminescent fronds had faded to a pale blue. He had ruled the council for 600 years. In all that time, he had never once questioned whether the council's decisions were right. The council was civilization. Civilization was order. Order was survival. And humanity threatened all of it. The charges against the human species are as follows, announced. His voice echoed through the chamber, translated instantly into 17,000 languages. First, unauthorized expansion into territories designated for future council use. Second, development of weapons technology without proper oversight. Third, cultural contamination of 12 protected species. Fourth, and most serious, persistent questioning of council authority and ancient law. Listened without expression. She had heard these charges many times during the 3 years of trials and hearings. She knew they were excuses. The real crime of humanity was much simpler. They had grown too fast. They had learned too quickly. They had looked at the ancient laws that governed galactic civilization and asked a question that no species had asked in 100,000 years. Why? The council has deliberated, continued. The sentence is exile. Effective immediately, humanity is stripped of all galactic privileges. Your jump gates will be disabled. Your star charts will be erased from the network. Your species will be confined to your home system until such time as the council determines you have learned proper respect for civilized order. A ripple of approval moved through the chamber. The delegation clicked their mandibles in satisfaction. They had pushed hardest for this outcome. Human traders had accidentally outcompeted their merchants in 3 separate sectors, and they had long memories. The ambassador made a gesture of dismissal with 6 of his 8 arms. Perhaps in 10,000 years they will be ready to rejoin civilization, he said, loud enough for everyone to hear. If they survive that long. Laughter filled the chamber. The sound came in clicks, whistles, rumbles, and frequencies beyond human hearing, but the meaning was clear. Smiled. It was not a pleasant smile. It was the smile of someone who had expected exactly this outcome and had already planned what came next. We accept your verdict, she said. Her voice was quiet, but the chamber's systems carried it to every delegate. Humanity will return to our home system. We will trouble you no further. She paused, letting the silence stretch. But I want every species in this chamber to remember this moment. Remember that we came to you in peace. Remember that we asked to learn from you and you called us primitive. Remember that we offered friendship and you gave us contempt. The delegation stopped clicking. Something in her voice had changed. You look at humanity and you see a young species, weak, inexperienced. You think our exile is a kindness, a lesson we need to learn. Eyes moved across the chamber, meeting the gaze of species that could see and letting her voice reach those who could not. But you have made a mistake. You have forgotten your own history. Every species in this chamber was young once. Every species struggled. Every species faced moments when survival seemed impossible. She took a single step forward. The difference is that you were given help. The precursors left you their technology. They gave you the jump gates, the translators, the power systems that make your civilization possible. You did not earn these things. They were gifts. Angry murmurs filled the chamber. No one spoke of the precursors this way. They were saviors, gods, the foundation of everything. Humanity received nothing, continued. We climbed out of our gravity well alone. We split the atom alone. We reached our moon alone. Everything we have, we built with our own hands and our own minds. High Arbiter's fronds flickered with irritation. Ambassador, your species' brief history of struggle does not excuse your violations of. I am not asking for excuses, interrupted. I am making a promise. The chamber fell silent. In 10,000 years, no one had ever interrupted the High Arbiter. You are cutting us off from your jump gates. You are erasing your star charts from our systems. You think you are isolating us, weakening us. Smile returned. You are doing nothing of the kind. You are freeing us from your limitations, your ancient technology, your ancient rules, your ancient thinking. She turned and walked toward the exit of the chamber. Her footsteps echoed in the sudden silence. At the threshold, she paused and looked back one final time. We will see you soon. The ambassador laughed again, but this time the sound was uncertain. Soon, you will be trapped in your system for generations. Your primitive rockets cannot cross interstellar distances. Your species will wither and die in isolation, and the galaxy will forget you ever existed. Did not respond. She simply walked through the door and disappeared. 3 days later, the last human ship left Council space. The jump gates leading to the Sol system were shut down. The star charts were erased. Every record of humanity's brief membership in galactic civilization was archived and forgotten. The Council returned to its ancient business of maintaining order across 100,000 worlds. Species traded and squabbled and occasionally fought small wars that the Council mediated. Life continued as it had for 100,000 years. No one noticed when the electromagnetic signatures from human space began to change. No one noticed when those signatures fell silent entirely. And no one remembered its promise until it was far too late. 70 years passed like water through open fingers. The Galactic Council continued its endless work of managing civilization. Trade disputes were resolved. Territorial boundaries were adjusted. 3 minor wars were fought and forgotten. The 17 ruling species maintained their positions at the top of galactic society, and the younger species served and obeyed as they always had. Humanity faded from memory like a dream upon waking. A few academics studied the records of the exile. A few historians wrote papers about the strange, aggressive species that had briefly troubled galactic order. But to most of the galaxy's inhabitants, humans were nothing more than a cautionary tale told to young species who questioned council authority. This is what happens when you challenge civilization. You disappear. Counselor of the Monitoring Division did not care about history. She was a young Eth, barely 300 years old, and her job was simple: watch the sensors, file the reports, and never ask questions. It was boring work, but it paid well, and she had learned long ago that boring was safe. The sensors she monitored covered the quarantine zones, regions of space where dangerous or primitive species were isolated from galactic civilization. Most showed nothing interesting: primitive radio signals, occasional spacecraft that never left their home systems, the slow, sad decline of species that had failed to earn the Council's approval. The Sol system was different. For decades, the sensors had shown exactly what the Council expected: radio signals, television broadcasts, the electromagnetic noise of a species struggling with its first steps into space. The signals were weak and scattered, the signs of a civilization that had lost access to advanced technology and was slowly falling backward. Then, 12 years ago, the signals had started to change. They became stronger, more complex. Patterns that it did not recognize began appearing in the data. She had filed a report. Her superiors had ignored it. Now the signals were gone entirely. The Sol system was electromagnetically silent. No radio waves, no television broadcasts, no subspace interference of any kind. The sensors showed a star system that might as well have been empty. I filed another report. This time she flagged it as urgent. "The humans have probably destroyed themselves," her supervisor said when she raised the concern. "Primitive species do that. Nuclear weapons, environmental collapse, any number of things. It happens all the time." "But the silence is too complete," I argued. "Even after a catastrophe, there would be residual signals, radiation, something." Her supervisor made the gesture that meant this conversation is over. "The humans are no longer our concern. The Council made that decision 70 years ago. Return to your duties." A return to her duties, but she could not stop watching the silent star system at the edge of the galaxy. Something was wrong. She could feel it in her bones. 3 months later, the colony on Nexus 7 went dark. The colony was not important by galactic standards. A farming world. 3 million inhabitants growing food for the only remarkable thing about it was its location. It was one of the closest inhabited systems to the Sol quarantine zone. When the colony's regular transmissions stopped, the Council treated it as a technical problem. Communication arrays failed sometimes. Solar storms interfered with subspace signals. A repair ship was dispatched to investigate. The repair ship never reported back. Commander of the Defense Fleet was ordered to investigate with a squadron of 12 warships. She was a veteran of 40 years of service, and she had seen many strange things in the galaxy, but nothing had prepared her for what she found at Nexus 7. The colony was intact. Every building stood exactly where it had been built. The fields were tended. The weather control systems hummed with power. The repair ship sat in the main landing bay, its engines cold and its crew missing. But every single was gone. 3.2 million people had vanished without a trace. A's soldiers searched the colony for 6 hours. They found no bodies, no signs of struggle, no evidence of disease or natural disaster. It was as if everyone had simply stood up and walked away in the middle of their daily lives. Then they found the message. It was carved into the stone floor of the colony's main plaza. The letters were perfect script, each one exactly 2 meters tall. The carving was so precise that it looked like it had been done by machines. "We remember Nexus 7's vote. We remember who laughed loudest. Do not worry, they are not dead. They are relocated. Consider this a demonstration." I read the message 3 times. Her mind refused to process what it meant. She ordered her communications officer to contact the Council immediately. Priority 1, Emergency Protocol. The officer tried, then tried again, then looked up with an expression of pure terror. "Commander, our subspace transmitters are not working. None of them. The systems are powered, but the signals are not leaving the ship." I ran to the bridge. She ordered her engineers to check every system. The results were the same across all 12 ships. Every piece of technology that relied on precursor designs had stopped functioning. Navigation systems showed nothing but static. Weapons systems reported ready but would not fire. Even the artificial gravity flickered uncertainly. "Commander," the sensor officer said, his voice was barely a whisper. "A ship has appeared on our sensors. It did not come through a jump gate, it just arrived." The ship was small, perhaps 1/100th the size of A's flagship. Its design was unlike anything in the galactic database. Clean lines, elegant curves, no visible weapons ports, but something about its shape suggested power beyond anything I had ever encountered. The ship transmitted on a frequency that should not have existed. "Commander of the Defense Fleet, this is the Terran synthesis vessel Dawn's Edge. Humanity requests a dialogue. You have 12 hours to consider our offer." The transmission paused. After 12 hours, we will demonstrate what we can do when we are not being polite. I stared at the small ship on her sensors. 70 years ago, humanity had been exiled, primitive, helpless, cut off from everything that made galactic civilization possible. Now they were back, and they had done something to an entire colony that her fleet could not explain or undo. She thought of the message carved in the plaza. We remember who laughed loudest. They had laughed loudest. They had pushed hardest for humanity's exile. They had celebrated when the Sol system was sealed away. I realized, with a cold certainty that settled into her stomach like stone, that the galaxy was about to change. The ancient order that had existed for 100,000 years was ending, and humanity had come to collect what they were owed. The Galactic Council met in emergency session for the first time in 800 years. The Great Chamber was filled with fear. The 17 ruling species had received the same reports: Nexus 7 empty, the fleet disabled, and a human ship that had appeared from nowhere using technology that should not exist. More reports came every hour. Human ships had been spotted near a dozen systems. They did not attack. They did not threaten. They simply appeared, watched, and vanished. The effect on galactic civilization was like dropping a stone into still water. Panic spread outward in waves. High Arbiter had not left his chamber in 3 days. He was ancient now, his fronds so pale they were almost transparent. In 600 years of rule, he had never faced a crisis he could not manage through patience and procedure. Now procedure seemed meaningless. A human delegation had requested permission to address the council, had considered refusing. Some of the other ruling species wanted to refuse, but what would be the point? Humanity had already proven they could reach any system in the galaxy without using jump gates. They had proven they could disable precursor technology at will. Refusing to listen would only make them angry. And the council was beginning to understand that making humanity angry might be very dangerous. Admiral walked into the great chamber alone. He was a tall man with a shaved head and eyes that seemed to see more than they should. He wore no uniform, no symbols of rank, just simple black clothing that somehow made him more intimidating than any ceremonial armor. What the council did not know was that was not really alone. His consciousness was distributed across 17 ships currently holding position around council space. He could see the chamber through his eyes and through the sensors of ships positioned light years apart. He could feel the electromagnetic signatures of 10,000 nervous delegates. He could taste the chemical markers of their fear. Was no longer purely human. None of his people were. "Thank you for agreeing to meet," he said. His voice was calm, almost friendly. "I know this is difficult for you. Change is always difficult." The ambassador rose from his seat. He was the same delegate who had laughed at Ambassador 70 years ago. He had not aged well. "Change?" The ambassador's 8 arms trembled with anger. "You have kidnapped 3 million citizens. You have disabled our ships. You have appeared in our space without permission. This is not change. This is an act of war." Tilted his head slightly. "Is it? The colonists are alive and comfortable. They are being housed in a habitat we constructed in a pocket dimension, a small universe that exists alongside your own. They have food, shelter, and entertainment. When our business here is complete, they will be returned unharmed." "Pocket dimension." The ambassador made a sound of disbelief. "That is impossible. Such technology does not exist." "It did not exist," corrected. "Now it does. Humanity built it." He smiled slightly. "You gave us 70 years alone with nothing but our minds and our determination. What did you think we would do with that time?" Leaned forward on his throne. "You were cut off from all precursor technology. Your species had no faster-than-light capability. How could you possibly have advanced so far?" "That is exactly the right question," said, "and the answer will change everything you believe about your civilization." He raised his hand, and a holographic display appeared in the center of the chamber. It showed the galaxy, but not as the Council knew it. New lines connected the stars. New patterns emerged from the familiar shapes. The precursor technology that powers your civilization is old, very old, and it was designed with a purpose that none of you have ever questioned. The display changed to show a jump gate, then a universal translator, then a standard power core. These systems are elegant, efficient, they work perfectly, but they have one characteristic that should have made you suspicious long ago. Paused. They cannot be improved. Murmurs filled the chamber. Of course, precursor technology could not be improved. It was perfect. It was the foundation of civilization. In 100,000 years, continued, no species has ever invented a better jump gate. No species has ever built a better translator. No species has ever developed alternative technology that surpassed precursor designs. Do you know why? He let the silence stretch. Because you never tried. Why would you? The precursors gave you everything you needed. All you had to do was maintain what they left behind. And so, generation after generation, your scientists studied precursor technology instead of developing their own. Your engineers learned to repair instead of create. Your civilizations became dependent on systems you did not understand and could not replicate. His voice hardened. The precursors did not give you gifts. They gave you chains. They created a galaxy of species that could never grow beyond certain limits, that could never challenge whatever purpose the precursors had in mind. They created a civilization of dependence and called it order. This is lies, the representative hissed. The precursors were our saviors. They lifted us from barbarism. They lifted you into a cage, replied. A comfortable cage, but a cage nonetheless. Humanity was never inside that cage. When you exiled us, you did not trap us. You freed us. The display changed again. Now it showed Earth, orbited by structures that made the Council's greatest achievements look like children's toys. Ships moved through space without jump gates. Worlds floated in orbits that conventional physics. A civilization of billions operated as one vast intelligence while celebrating individual identity. In 70 years, humanity has advanced further than your civilization has in 100,000. We developed fold space technology that makes your jump gates obsolete. We created neural interfaces that put your translators to shame. We merged with artificial intelligence and became something new, something better. Spread his arms. We are the Terran synthesis. We are what a species can become when it is free to grow without limits, and we have returned to offer you a choice. Spoke, his voice barely a whisper. What choice? In 6 months, the precursor systems across this galaxy will begin to fail. We have developed technology that neutralizes their power sources. Your jump gates will stop working. Your translators will fall silent. Your power cores will go dark. Panic erupted in the chamber. Delegates screamed accusations and pleas. Without precursor technology, civilization would collapse. Billions would die. Waited for silence. You can adapt, he said quietly. We will help you. We will teach you to build your own technology, your own future. It will be difficult, but you will survive. Your species will grow in ways you cannot imagine. He paused. Or you can fight us. You can try to destroy us before we destroy your chains. But I promise you, we have spent 70 years preparing for this moment. We know every weakness of your civilization because those weaknesses were designed into it from the beginning. Turned and walked toward the exit. Like before him, he paused at the threshold. You have 6 months to decide. Choose wisely. The chamber remained silent long after he was gone. The galaxy broke apart like glass dropped on stone. Within days of Admiral's address, the 17 ruling species had split into factions. Some wanted to negotiate. Some wanted to fight. Some simply wanted to hide and hope the storm passed them by. The Eth were the first to accept humanity's offer. They had always been outsiders in galactic civilization. their strange biology making them uncomfortable allies for the other ruling species. When human ambassadors arrived the Eth welcomed them with open arms and open minds. "We always suspected something was wrong," Ambassador Shimmering Thought told the human delegation. "Our scientists discovered anomalies in precursor technology centuries ago. They were silenced. Their research was destroyed. We learned to stop asking questions." Now the questions could finally be answered. Within months, ETH scientists were working alongside human researchers. Their unique perspectives, they perceived reality through senses no human possessed, led to breakthroughs that accelerated the development of new technologies. The partnership proved what humanity had claimed: freedom to innovate produced miracles. Other species watched the ETH transformation with growing interest. A species of aquatic beings who had been marginalized sent secret communications to human contacts. The creatures who had nearly been exiled themselves for questioning council policies began preparing their population for change. But not everyone chose peace. The Dominion had ruled their sector of the galaxy with absolute authority for 60,000 years. Their ambassador had laughed at humanity's exile. Their leaders had mocked human primitiveness. The idea of accepting help from the species they had humiliated was unthinkable. Supreme Commander Al stood before the assembled War Council of the Dominion. His 8 arms were decorated with the medals of 100 campaigns. His carapace bore scars from battles that had shaped galactic history. He had never lost a war in 300 years of service. "The humans are bluffing," he declared. "Their technology may be impressive, but they are still one species against an empire. We have 10,000 warships. We have weapons that can crack planets. We will crush them before they can threaten us further." Some council members argued for caution. They had seen the reports from Nexus 7. They had heard what happened to Commander A's fleet, but Al dismissed their concerns with contempt. "The humans showed mercy because they are weak. They relocated those colonists because they could not bring themselves to kill. We have no such weakness." The war fleet launched 3 weeks later. 10,000 ships, the largest military force assembled in galactic history. Dreadnoughts that stretched for kilometers, fighters that numbered in the millions, weapons platforms that could sterilize worlds. Their destination was the Sol system. Their mission was simple: extermination. The fleet never arrived. The jump gates deposited them in empty space, light years from their target. Navigation systems showed nothing but static. Communication arrays produced only silence. The mighty armada drifted in the void, suddenly blind and deaf. Then the human ships appeared. There were only 12 of them, small vessels barely visible against the backdrop of stars. They did not attack. They simply surrounded the fleet and waited. Admiral's voice echoed through every ship in the armada. "Supreme Commander Al, your fleet has been disabled. Your weapons will not function. Your engines will not respond. You are not in danger. We have no intention of killing anyone. But you need to understand something before we proceed." The human ships moved closer. Instruments that still functioned showed energy readings that should have been impossible. "We could destroy your fleet in 17 seconds. That is not an estimate. That is a calculation based on the exact capabilities of your vessels and our own. Every ship, every soldier, gone in less time than it takes to draw breath." Al stood on his bridge, watching the small human vessels circle his flagship like predators examining wounded prey. "We choose not to," continued. "Not because we are weak, not because we cannot bring ourselves to kill, but because killing you serves no purpose. You are not our enemies. You are prisoners of the same system that tried to imprison us. The only difference is that you do not yet understand your chains." The human ship stopped moving. A massive structure appeared in the distance, something that had not existed moments before. It was a planet, a constructed world, complete with atmosphere and oceans, orbiting a star that had been moved from somewhere else. "Your fleet is being transported to that system," said. "Your crews will be housed on the planet. They will have food, shelter, and everything they need to survive. When you are ready to rejoin galactic civilization as partners rather than conquerors, you will be welcome." Al's mandibles clicked with rage. "You cannot do this. You cannot simply relocate an entire war fleet. The energy required would be impossible by your standards," agreed. "Trivial by ours." One by one, the ships vanished. They did not explode. They did not die. They simply ceased to exist in one location and began to exist in another. The process took less than an hour. When it was done, a single message appeared on the constructed planet's surface, carved into a mountain visible from orbit. "We could have killed you. We chose not to. When you have had time to reconsider, you are welcome to rejoin galactic civilization. There is no shame in learning from mistakes. Humanity has made plenty of our own." News of the fleet's fate spread across the galaxy faster than light. Species that had been considering resistance quietly changed their plans. Species that had been neutral suddenly found themselves interested in humanity's offer. High Arbiter requested a private audience with Admiral. The ancient leader of the Galactic Council looked like a creature already dead, his fronds so dim they barely glowed. "I do not understand," he said. His voice was tired, lost. "How did you advance so far? We had 100,000 years of civilization. You had less than 300 years in space." His expression softened. Despite everything this being had done, despite the exile and the humiliation and the arrogance, he found himself feeling something close to pity. "You had 100,000 years of stagnation," he said gently. "The precursors did not give you technology to help you grow. They gave you technology to keep you manageable. Every species that joined the Council stopped innovating, stopped questioning, stopped trying. You were comfortable. You were safe." He placed his hand on its withered appendage. "Humanity was desperate. Desperation is our oldest teacher. When you cut us off from everything, you forced us to create everything ourselves. We had no choice but to innovate, no choice but to question, no choice but to grow." Was silent for a long moment. "What happens now?" he finally asked. "Now," said, "we build something new, something better. A civilization where no species is chained to technology they cannot understand, where every being is free to question and grow and become whatever they choose to become." "And the Council?" Smiled. "The Council as you knew it is finished, but something better will take its place, and if you choose, you can help us build it." For the first time in 600 years, felt something he had forgotten was possible. Hoping. 3 years after humanity's return, the galaxy had become unrecognizable. The old Galactic Council had dissolved completely. In its place stood something new, the Galactic Synthesis. It was not ruled by ancient species or hidden masters. It was governed by principles that humanity had learned through centuries of struggle on their principles. They had almost forgotten themselves before the exile reminded them. No species was superior, no knowledge was forbidden, no question was too dangerous to ask. The new Galactic Parliament orbited a star that humanity had moved to create a symbolic center for their civilization. The act itself was a message. What once seemed impossible was now routine. What once seemed divine was now achievable. The limits that had defined galactic civilization for 100,000 years were gone. Admiral stood on the observation deck of the Parliament station, watching ships from 100 species move through the surrounding space. He was no longer Admiral of anything. The Terran synthesis did not use military ranks anymore, but the title had stuck, and he had stopped correcting people. Beside him stood Ambassador Shimmering Thought of the EV. Their bioluminescent patterns flickered with complex emotions as they observed the traffic below. "Do you ever wonder if we were too merciful?" they asked. The still refused to leave their constructed system. the old council plot from Exile Worlds. Some say humanity should have finished the job. Shook his head slowly. That is exactly what the old council would have done. That is what the precursors designed them to do: eliminate threats, enforce conformity, maintain control at any cost. He turned to face his friend. We became powerful enough to destroy everything, every species that opposed us, every system that threatened our vision. We could have made the galaxy silent and peaceful and completely under our control. His expression grew serious. But that is not power. That is fear wearing a mask of strength. Real power is knowing you can destroy something and choosing to build instead. Real strength is having every reason to hate and choosing to understand instead. A young approached them. Her name was and her grandmother had been among the colonists relocated from Nexus 770 years ago. In another universe, that event might have created generations of hatred. Instead, it had sparked curiosity. I had become one of the first to formally study human history and philosophy. She had learned about humanity's wars, their cruelties, their moments of darkness. She had also learned about their capacity for forgiveness and growth and change. The Educational Committee has approved the new curriculum, she announced. Every young being in the synthesis will learn the true history of the precursors. They will learn how the old council maintained control through dependency, and they will learn what happened when one species refused to accept those chains. Smiled. This was the real victory, not the defeat of the fleet, not the dissolution of the council, but this. Young minds learning to question. Young beings understanding that the universe was bigger than anyone had told them. My people are starting to understand, continued. Not all of us, not yet, but my generation grew up hearing stories about the humans who could have erased us but chose to teach us instead. That means something. Below them, the parliament session was beginning. Delegates from 60 species, some former rulers, some former outcasts, some newly emerged into sapience, gathered to discuss the future of their civilization. There were arguments, disagreements, occasionally anger. But there was also something that had been missing from galactic politics for 100,000 years: genuine hope. A communication arrived from Earth. Despite everything that had changed, Earth remained humanity's emotional home, the blue world where their species had been born, the place they returned to when they needed to remember who they were. A new generation of human children was studying history. They had asked their teachers a question that was now being forwarded throughout the synthesis for comment. Why did the old species fear us? Considered the question carefully. Then he composed his response, knowing it would become part of the official educational archives, knowing that young beings across the galaxy would read his words and learn from them. They feared us because they did not understand us. They saw a young species that asked too many questions and grew too quickly, and refused to accept the limits they had been given. They thought we were dangerous because we did not know our place. He paused, gathering his thoughts. They were right that we were dangerous, but they were wrong about why. Humans are not dangerous because we are violent or aggressive or cruel. We are dangerous because we refuse to accept that anything is impossible. We look at chains and see challenges. We look at prisons and see puzzles to be solved. We look at forever and see not yet. The words came more easily now. The old species exiled us because they thought isolation would break us. Instead, it freed us from their limitations. They laughed when our ambassador said we would see them soon. They thought we were making an empty threat. He smiled, remembering. She had died 30 years ago, peacefully, surrounded by descendants who had inherited her determination and her hope. She had lived long enough to see her promise fulfilled. We kept our promise, but the real lesson is not about power or revenge. It is about what comes after. We could have become exactly what they feared: conquerors, destroyers, tyrants. We had every reason to hate, every justification for cruelty. They had humiliated us, abandoned us, tried to erase us from history. Looked out at the ships moving through Parliament space, vessels trading with former enemies, freighters sent by the younger generation who had rejected their elders' pride, carrying supplies to worlds still recovering from the transition. Researchers sharing discoveries with species who had once looked down on them. We chose differently. We chose to remember our own history. We remembered what it felt like to be young and struggling and afraid. We remembered the mistakes we made when we had power, the wars we fought, the peoples we oppressed, the cruelties we inflicted on each other. We decided that we would not repeat those mistakes on a galactic scale. The message was almost complete. He added one final thought. That is how humanity rose to galactic dominance, not by becoming the biggest threat in the cosmos, but by becoming the biggest hope. Not by destroying what came before, but by building something better from the pieces. He sent the message and returned his attention to the Parliament below. A heated debate was about resource allocation for newly contacted species. Some delegates wanted strict controls. Others wanted generous support. The argument would probably continue for days. That was fine, that was healthy. That was what freedom looked like, messy, complicated, and full of disagreement. Stood beside him, watching her elders argue. "Do you think they will ever stop fighting?" she asked. Laughed, "No, and that is the point. Fighting with words, with ideas, with passion is how we grow. The old council wanted silence, conformity, peace through control. We want something different. We want a galaxy that argues and questions and struggles and changes." He placed a hand on her shoulder. "Your grandmother was one of the first beings to experience what humanity could do. She was terrified. She thought we were monsters, but she also saw that we gave her people back, that we kept our word, that we were capable of mercy." I nodded slowly. She told me that story many times before she died. She said she spent years hating humanity. Then she spent years trying to understand humanity. And finally, she spent years hoping that her own species could become what humanity had become. She looked up at him. Not powerful, not dominant, but free, truly free. Smiled. "That is all we ever wanted," he said. "For ourselves and for everyone else. The freedom to grow, the freedom to question, the freedom to become whatever we choose to become." Below them, the Parliament continued its work. Above them, the stars burned with the light of 100 billion suns. And somewhere in the vast darkness between, ships carried the message of the new civilization to species that had never heard it before. The galaxy was no longer silent. It was finally truly alive.